That's how you create democracies? By kicking out the indigenous population so that you can have a Jewish majority? But that's what all young Israelis believe. They learn in the political science department that in order to build a democratic society where the majority can decide what to do, you are entitled first to define the majority, even by means of killing the other side, so that you will be sure what would be the result of the democratic elections. Israelis don't find it at all bizarre that if you create a democracy, you can also perpetrate ethnic cleansing and genocide, so that you get the right electorate for the future democracy. But a lot of people in the West will talk about Israel as a democratic state, because they would say the majority votes and decides what to do. The fact that the majority has to be kept all the time by ethnically cleansing people, by massacring them, by colonizing them, by putting them in great ghettos like in Gaza, is never discussed as part of the Israeli democracy. And I think we should bring that to the fore. The only way to keep Israel as a democratic state, according to the Zionist ideology, is to continue to be a criminal state. It is almost like allowing people in the worst kind of prison, the worst kind of criminals, to have a democratic system by the force of the gun, by the force of the brutality, by the force of their sheer power. Now, the third and last concept I would like to talk about is, which comes out of colonialism and ethnic cleansing, which are the main driving ideologies behind the Jewish state. Ethnic cleansing and colonialism are the reason that we have a Jewish state in Israel. This is not what we are told, of course, either as Israelis who were born there, and we are not told as people who support Israel around the world. We are told about two very different ideologies. We are told about the need to find the Jews a safe place, and we know it's not a very safe place for Jews. It's the only unsafe place for Jews is to be in Israel. That's the place where most of the Jews have been dying in great numbers since 1948. And that this is the place where Jews can recreate themselves as a national movement, where they can exercise the right for self-determination. But we know that Israel is not interested in the right of self-determination for the Jews. This is why it brings hundreds and thousands of non-Jews from all over the world to settle in Israel, because what is important for Israel is not self-determination for the Jewish people. What is important for Israel is to make sure that it's not an Arab state. And if you are a Baha'i and you live on a mountain in the Himalaya, but you are definitely not an Arab, you will become an Israeli Jewish citizen in no time, if you are willing to come over. There's no problem. The rabbis would make sure that you are a Jew, and they may cause you to go through some painful operations, but if you are a man, but all in all, you are welcome because you are not an Arab. And if you're an Arab Jew, you will have to de-Arabize yourself. Otherwise, you will not be welcomed in the Israeli Jewish society. Now, the third and last concept, and then I'll reach to my 30 minutes, is the ethnic purity. The ethnic purity of the state. And this is related to the right of return. Most of the people, especially some of our best friends, and I mean it not ironically, as I just published a book with Noam Chomsky, I include him in this. Some of our best friends are against the right of return, and their practical explanation. They would say it's unrealistic to tell the refugees that they should look forward for the possibility of returning, that they should be encouraged to think about a different kind of future. And I would say that the departure point for this analysis is not practicality, is not realpolitik, because if the basis for analyzing, as Uri Avneri does, and Noam Chomsky does, and all our, and I'm, as I say, I'm not cynically saying our good friends. They are my good friends, but I totally disagree with them on this. If the basis for analyzing the situation is realpolitik, then it means that the balance of power determines your attitudes. Well, the balance of power, as we heard yesterday, between the largest and strongest army in the Middle East and the weakest military power in the world, right? If this balance of power determines our attitudes, we shouldn't even meet here today. We should give in to the Israeli dictates. And we know the Israelis are very clear what they want. They want to have as much of Palestine as possible, with as few Palestinians as possible. They wanted it in 1882 and they want it in 2010. This hasn't changed. The means have changed, the historical circumstances have changed, but the vision of what would be a thriving, successful Israeli society is a society which has as few Arabs as possible and as much of Palestine as possible. That hasn't changed. So if realpolitik determines our attitudes, we should give in to this vision. So in any case, we are not dealing with realpolitik when we are challenging what Israel wants. And the reason the Israelis refuse even to acknowledge the right of return, let alone practically implement the right of return, is not because, as some people would think, because they have a very serious conscientious problem of admitting that they have kicked out and massacred people 3 years after the Holocaust. I once thought that this was the main problem. I admit, I once wrote about it. I was hopeful, that because I'm an optimistic. I'm not very tall. I always see the bottom half of the glass. So I thought the Israelis don't want to talk about the right of return because people who were, like Uri Avneri, for instance, were involved in the ethnic cleansing itself, feel unhappy about it. And if you talk about the right of return, you bring, this is the kind of panacea, the remedy for the illness. No, I don't think this has had anything to do with it, unfortunately. It makes a lot of sense from a Zionist point of view to say Arabs are not welcome. Whether these are Arabs we kicked out, whether these are Arabs who we never touched, whether these are Arab Jews who want to insist to remain Arabs, even if they are Jews, they are not welcome. Because we won't be a democracy if these people would come in. That's the major thing. That's the main Israeli refusal for the right of return. So when you support, and with this I will end, when you support the Palestinian right of return, you are not only supporting, which I understand we all do, the right of people who were kicked out to come back if they want to. You are not only acknowledging the crime of the ethnic cleansing in 1948. You are not only abiding by United Nations resolution that very clearly support the right of people to return. You are saying a very simple no to racism. That's what you are doing. You just say no to the only racist state we have in the Middle East. We have not very nice regimes in the Middle East, I agree. The political regimes in the Middle East are nothing to write home about. I would not publicize them as sort of recommendation for future societies to build their politics on this basis. But not one of them is racist. The only racist state is the Jewish state of Israel. And one of the only ways of engaging with this racism is to challenge it on the right of the refugees to return. Not because it's practical or not practical, because it deals with the genetic code of the Jewish state. The idea that you can colonize is not new. But the idea in the 21st century that you can maintain this colonization by openly pursuing a racist, maintaining a racist state should not be acceptable, especially not in this country. Thank you.